favor. Jackson Snyder Presents is back.
Greetings to you, and thank you for listening to Thinking Believers on Jackson Snyder Presents. I would like to have an intimate talk with church folks about the 10 Commandments. So let's begin.
Have you ever been asked, I wonder, do you know the exact day and hour you were saved? How about, do you believe in the rapture? How about, do you believe once saved, always saved? How about this one? Do you believe in Christian perfection? Do you believe in speaking in tongues? Do you believe in Halloween? These kinds of test questions are often formulated to start a friendly argument. Other questions test exactly what you know. Somebody recently asked me, can you name all 10 commandments? Another asked, can you name the 12 tribes of Israel? How about these questions? Who married Adam and Eve? Where did Cain get his wife? Was Elijah abducted by aliens? Are you a Trinitarian? Someone once asked me, are you a prelapsarian, an Arminian, or a double predestinarian? I answered, why, I'm a Buckeye, of course. Here's a really good question. Did Jesus ever catch a cold? The old missionary lady said with absolute assurance that it was impossible for Jesus to catch a cold. What do you think? Here's a trick question. Did Jesus ever laugh? It's a trick because some say that if Jesus didn't do it in the Bible, then he didn't do it. The Bible didn't record Jesus laughing, so the answer must be no. If we take such literalistic positions, then there are a lot of things that people do every day that Jesus didn't do. We know that Jesus ate, but did he burp? Here's the most loaded question of all. If you died tonight, would you go to heaven or hell? This one's always a setup. You only have two choices. Nobody's going to say hell. So when they answer heaven, the next question is, why will you go to heaven? There's the trap. You're now obligated to play the game. 7 out of 10 times the answer is, well, I'm a good person, as good as anybody else. I don't smoke or drink or carouse much, and I go to church sometimes, so I think I'll go to heaven. That's just what the religious expert wants to hear, because he's all set for your lecture. When he gets in my face and asks me, if you died tonight, would you go to heaven or hell? I usually answer something like, fishing. That usually confuses them enough for me to escape. If I'm feeling particularly nasty, I say, none of your business. Some use evangelism as an excuse for acting obnoxious. You know that as well as I do. An obnoxious guy from the Sadducee denomination had just tested Jesus with a trick question. We had a case involving 7 brothers. The first married and then died without children, leaving his wife to his brother. The same thing happened with the second and third, and so on to the 7th, and then last of all the woman herself died. Now, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since she'd been married to all of them? See, the Sadducees didn't believe in the supernatural, in angels or life, in the resurrection. That's why they were so sad, you see. No future hope. They asked Jesus the question to trap him, because Jesus openly preached the resurrection of the dead. Their question proposes a sticky situation for those of us who believe in the afterlife. Some people ask themselves this same question formed a little differently. One elderly man was born again at the age of 75. He'd been married 4 times, and all his ex-wives were still living. In reviewing his life, he decided that all his wives were rotten, but the second wife was the least horrible, so he was now going to remarry her so that they could be married in heaven. He sure didn't want to get stuck with any of the other 3, or worse, with all 4 of them at once. So he thought, now that he was a Christian, he'd plan for eternity. But Jesus didn't fall for that trick. You know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God, he chided them as they disappeared. As for the answer to which brother the wife will be married to in the resurrection, the answer is, to none of them. Next, the guy from the Pharisees comes along to test Jesus. Pharisees were the holiness crowd. They believed in the resurrection, but to get there meant to do it their way. If you grew a beard and joined up with them, then you'd be saved. If you were a woman, you might make it if you put a sack on your head, stayed home, and kept your mouth shut. That sounds like some denominations today, doesn't it? Anyway, the Pharisee asks a question about the 10 Commandments. His bunch believed that breaking one commandment was the same as breaking them all. When the Pharisee asked which one commandment was the greatest, he wanted to hear Jesus say, all of them. But Jesus doesn't comply because he knew what was in the Pharisee's heart. He throws the Pharisee a red herring by saying that the greatest commandment is to love Yahweh. Jesus packs the first 4 of the 10 commandments into one great commandment, like a sandwich. A sandwich is just one thing, but it contains many, many things, like 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. What was in the great commandment sandwich? What does it mean to love Yahweh with all your heart? Let's find out from Yahweh himself in the first 4 commandments from Exodus 20. The first is, I am Yahweh your God. You shall have no other gods to rival me. If you have a correct translation of the scripture, then your God herein reveals his name. His name is Yahweh. He will have no rivals any more than your husband or wife will. He is jealous because he loves. Second of all, you shall not make yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. We Christians don't carve gods, do we? Why, we certainly do. I won't be worshiping with the rest of you this week because I have to go on my boat, in my camper, to my cabin, on my vacation. One lady told me she wouldn't make it to the worship service because she had to wash the windows. She may have been an idolater, but she certainly wasn't a liar. When something comes between a Christian and his participation in corporate worship, he carves an idol. You can wash the windows anytime, but doing so in lieu of corporate worship makes your windows your God for at least an hour. The third commandment's found in verse 7. You shall not misuse the name of Yahweh your God, for Yahweh will not leave unpunished anyone who misuses his name. Why, his name is not Allah, Jehovah, El Shaddai, or God. God isn't even a name. It's a title with a capital letter. There are millions of gods. Have you seen books written by famous evangelists titled The Names of God? He has only one name, and he told us what it was. His name is Yahweh. That's the only name he has revealed to us, and it's sacred. I've heard people say that they don't know anything about this Yahweh, that they don't know what language the preacher's speaking in. But no matter what you've been taught, in 2003 you're privileged to learn the sacred name of your God, and just at the time of his coming. Yahweh sent me out here to tell you his name. You're very special to have received his revelation. Will you then continue to misuse his name? Others just aren't comfortable using the name Yahweh. I'm not comfortable in new shoes, but after I wear them a while, they just become a part of me. Friends, there's power in his real name because his is the name above all names. Use his name, and it will become a comfort to you. Anyway, he'll punish you in love for misusing his name or taking his name in vain. If his name is really Yahweh and you call him some other name, aren't you the disobedient child? Yes, you need punishment. Some of us have punished others for breaking the third commandment when we ourselves have been breaking it all our lives. Remember what Yahweh says about his name in Exodus 3:15. Yahweh is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. Exodus 3:15. All generations means our generation too. Yahweh, the name, means I was, I am, I will be. He's revealed his name as a sign that he is and will be the answer we need in our time of need. It's a beautiful thing for us to know and use his name. It's a sign to the world that he's ours and we are his. The fourth commandment comes from verse 8 of Exodus 20. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath for Yahweh your God. You shall do no work on that day, for in 6 days Yahweh created, but on the seventh day he rested. That's why Yahweh has blessed the Sabbath day and made it sacred. This week, a minister asked me a trick question. He said, I went to a Seventh-day Adventist retreat. Do you believe in keeping the seventh-day Sabbath? That's what he asked me, and I bid on that, of course. Yes, brother, I believe in keeping the seventh-day Sabbath according to the Scriptures. Saturday is the seventh day. Any calendar shows that. He replied, I believe I can choose my own day as a Sabbath. I asked him, what day do you choose then? He said, whichever day is most convenient for me. I said, then you don't keep the Sabbath after all, because Yahweh said the seventh day is the Sabbath. If Yahweh says that, then who do you think you are to change the Sabbath to any day you want? I said it jokingly, but I meant it. We have tremendous difficulties and excuses in regards to honoring Yahweh's sacred day, but we never have any problem honoring the devil on Halloween or taking any other day that we want. Are you a fourth commandment keeper? Keeping the Sabbath isn't that hard. You gather your family for prayer, then you take the rest of the day off. What's so hard about that? Jesus said that the Sabbath was made for you, and it's holy to the Father. Some say that they have to work on Saturday to make a living. But our God says, no, you don't. Malachi 3:8. Put me to the test. See if I don't open the floodgates of heaven and pour out an abundant blessing for you. Put him to the test, my friend. If you have to work on the Sabbath and would rather honor it, pray this prayer daily. Father, I want to be in your perfect will and honor your Sabbath day. Make a way for me to do this, and I shall. If in this way you'll diligently pray, he'll tirelessly work to pave the way. Loving the Father as he desires is not just falling in love with him over and over and over again. Our love is to be disciplined. All of the first 4 commandments describe exactly how Yahweh wants to be loved. He couldn't have made himself any plainer, and we should honor his wishes, expressing our love by emulating his Son, who kept all his commandments for the love of him. All this was understood perfectly by the inquisitive Pharisee. But now Jesus boldly adds a second great commandment. You must love your neighbor as yourself. In these words, Jesus presents him with another sandwich. This one is thicker and harder to chew. It's packed with meat of the final 6 of the 10 commandments that concern loving one's neighbor. The 5th commandment is found in verse 12. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land that Yahweh your God is giving you. Folks in the olden days didn't live as long as we do today. The 5th commandment means that children have an obligation to take care of their parents, if need be, when the parents are no longer able to do so. Taking care of one's parents and grandparents is a sacred duty, except in the cases where parents are abusive. Such don't deserve any honor, but some get it nevertheless. Today, life expectancy is about 80 years. There are millions of elderly people who live in poverty while their selfish children prosper. To love one's neighbor means that you'll be your parents' and grandparents' benefactor for as long as they live. Someday your folks will be gone. Then you'll wish you'd spent an extra hour listening or an extra $1 helping. Jesus knows that if we can't love our own kin, we won't be able to love our neighbor either. The 6th and 7th commandments are found in verse 13 and 14 of Exodus 20. You shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery. Breaking the 6th and 7th commandments are deadly sins, mortal sins. One murder destroys many lives. Adultery, that is, infidelity in marriage, also destroys lives, and in these days of plague may lead to repercussions decades after the deed. Yahweh's love is made manifest when he prohibits people from committing deadly sins, because many innocent people, including children, are affected. For those who have committed deadly sins, Jesus may save you if you repent and sin no more. But if you haven't committed a deadly sin, don't put your Father's love to the test. You'll lose every single time. The 8th and 9th commandments are found in verses 15 and 16 of Exodus chapter 20. You shall not steal. You shall not give false evidence against your neighbor. Stealing and lying against your neighbor leave innocent victims as well. Ask forgiveness. Make restitution. That's how you can undo thefts and lies. You can love your neighbor by being truthful and honest in every situation. This way, even if you're accused, your conscience will be clear and your slate will be clean. And finally, the 10th commandment is found in verse 17 of Exodus 20. You shall not set your heart on your neighbor's house, spouse, man, woman, or possessions. The 10th commandment is against covetousness, which is greed, avarice, and materialism. Paul the Apostle defines covetousness as fornication, impurity, passion, evil desire, and idolatry. Wanting what has been afforded others eats up your potential and saps your strength. Covetousness leads to lust, obsession, compulsion, and misery. Friends, you already have wonderful things and people all around you, things that are valuable and people who love you. Count your blessings, name them one by one, and you'll break the back of covetousness, lust, and obsession. You'll also find yourself prospering in your own right. Upon hearing Jesus' second great commandment, the Pharisee, like the Sadducee before him, disappears. He treated his own kind with respect, but he couldn't love some old sinner. Pharisees are very negative toward others, and unfortunately, the Ten Commandments themselves are framed in fairly negative terms. But Yahweh sent his Son to interpret the harsh words of the covenant into meanings that express Jesus' vision of Yahweh as loving Father. Jesus didn't remove one jot or one tittle from the law of Yahweh. Had he done that, he would have been a sinner in need of a Savior, for sin is the transgression of the law. No, Jesus doesn't nail the Ten Commandments to the cross. He fulfills them all to present us with an example of how we might do likewise. Jesus thus reframes the commandments in terms of God's love for a loving people. Upon this framework hang all the law and the prophets. Loving Yahweh, keeping his commandments, that's still a matter of obedience, but not that which a slave renders a harsh master. Like the Sabbath commandment, the whole law was written for the sake of the preservation of humankind, for your survival and prosperity. Jesus reiterates the commandments of Yahweh because they both love you and desire that you achieve your highest and best good in this life and in the life to come. Now you do know what is expected, because I've explained it to you. Some say that Jesus is not talking about the Ten Commandments when he mentions these two, and that we're under grace now and not the law, so the commandments are no longer valid. But the Apostle John, who laid upon Christ's bosom, writes much later that this is what the love of God is, keeping his commandments. Nor are his commandments burdensome, because every child of God may, through them, overcome the world. Keeping the commandments, following in the footsteps of Jesus, and overcoming the world is not always a smooth, easy path. A righteous life is not a popular lifestyle. If you begin to honor Yahweh by following his commandments, you may become a target of both secular and, sadly, religious people. Public godliness has a price, for Yahweh's enemies control the world, as well as many Christian churches, so-called. One of the more publicized incidents involving the persecution on account of the Ten Commandments was in 1995, when the ACLU sued Alabama Judge Roy Moore for displaying the Ten Commandments on a plaque behind his bench. An incredible outcry came forth against Judge Moore from many quarters, both secular and religious, setting off a legal battle throughout the United States in regards to the validity of the Ten Commandments in the courtroom. That battle is still going on now, 8 years later. Charles Price, the Alabama state judge who finally ordered Judge Moore to take the commandments down, was applauded all over the country and awarded the coveted Profile in Courage Award of $25,000 by the John F. Kennedy Library. Charles Price, who took the commandments down, is not only a state judge, but a Sunday school teacher, one who would gladly receive accolades and money for betraying the very principles that he's responsible for teaching Christian children. What a contradiction that is. Let our lives be lived in agreement with our Father, our Savior, and our consciences, rather than in contradiction to the principles and practices of our Savior. The day will come when each of us will be held accountable for our lives. Will you be able to stand tall in that day? I hope you will, but in the meantime, take care. This is Jackson Snyder, Burnville United Methodist Church, 850-256-0232. And here is the Decalogue, or 10 words, or 10 commandments, from Exodus 20, verses 1 through 16, abridged from the New Jerusalem Bible. Then Elohim spoke all these words. He said, I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of Egypt, where you lived as slaves. I act with faithful love towards thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall have no gods to rival me. You shall not make yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything in heaven above, or on earth, or beneath, or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. You shall not misuse the name of Yahweh your Elohim, for Yahweh will not leave unpunished anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day, and keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath for Yahweh your Elohim. You and anyone living with you shall do no work that day. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens, earth, and sea, and all that these contain. But on the seventh day he rested. That is why Yahweh has blessed the Sabbath day and made it sacred. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false evidence against your neighbor. You shall not set your heart on your neighbor's house, or on your neighbor's spouse, nor any of your neighbor's possessions. I have just read the 10 Commandments, or the Decalogue. Now here are the 2 commandments, the greatest commandments. Master, which is the greatest commandment of the law? You must love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. You must love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang the whole law, and the prophets also. Let me now ask you, what is sin? Sin is disobedience to Yahweh Elohim, or his law. My friend, what else is sin? Sin is also failure to love Yahweh Elohim, love our neighbors, love ourselves. And so what else is sin? My friend, sin is failure to forgive Yahweh Elohim, our neighbors, or ourselves. What can cancel all sin and restore us to a right relationship with Yahweh Elohim? Claiming our right to forgiveness through Yeshua's blood, then asking and receiving forgiveness from Yahweh Elohim, from our neighbors, and from ourselves. Finally, with Yahweh's help, restraining ourselves from again committing sin. King David's prayer from Psalm 51, excerpted from the New Jerusalem Bible. David prays, "Have mercy on me, O Elohim. In your faithful love, in your great tenderness, wipe away my offenses. Wash me clean from my guilt. Purify me from my sin. For I am well aware of my offenses. My sin is constantly in mind. Remember, I was born guilty, a sinner from the moment of conception. But you delight in sincerity of heart, and in secret you teach me wisdom. Purify me with hyssop till I'm clean. Wash me till I'm whiter than snow. Let me hear the sound of joy and gladness, and the bones you have crushed will dance. Turn away your face from my sins, and wipe away all my guilt. Elohim, create in me a clean heart. Renew within me a resolute spirit. Do not thrust me away from your presence. Do not take away from me your spirit of holiness. Give me back the joy of your salvation. Sustain in me a generous spirit, and I shall teach the wicked your paths, and sinners will return to you. Next, we have the sevenfold prayer for the millennium. Will you pray for the parousia of Yeshua, the coming of your Messiah? Will you pray for the return of Torah, the law? Will you pray for the saints and martyrs of your faith? Will you pray for the peace of Jerusalem? Will you pray for the nations of the earth? Will you pray for equitable justice? And will you pray for the kingdom made manifest on earth as in heaven? My spirit with which I endowed you, and my words that I have put into your mouth, will not leave your mouth, or the mouths of your children, or the mouths of your grandchildren henceforth and forever, says Yahweh. Isaiah 59:21. You may now fast forward this tape and turn it over, and you'll have more of the 10 Commandments on the other side. Again, this is Jackson Snyder with the Burnville United Methodist Church, Century, Florida, 850-256-0232. Yahweh be blessing you.
We'll be right back after these important messages.
Text is Isaiah 29:13. Adonai then said, because this people approaches me only in words, honors me only with lip service, while their hearts are far from me, and reverence for me, as far as they're concerned, is nothing but human commandment, a lesson memorized. Very well. I shall have to go on astounding this people with prodigies and wonders, for the wisdom of its wise men is doomed, the understanding of any who understand will vanish. And the gospel text is from Mark chapter 7, 1 through 8. Now, when the Pharisees gathered together to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands defiled, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands, observing the traditions of the elders. And when they come from the marketplaces, they do not eat unless they purify themselves. And there are many other traditions which they observe, the washing of cups and pots and vessels of bronze. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, Why do you and your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with hands defiled? And he said to them, Well did Isaiah prophesy of you, hypocrites, as it is written, This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men. You leave the commandment of God and hold fast the tradition of men. Father Yahweh, we just ask that this word might go forth and that the whole world might come to know your law. In the name of Yahshua our Messiah. Amen. Once upon a time there was a little country church which was so desperate for a young preacher that the board hired a very young man from outside the denomination against the better judgment of the district superintendent. The preacher initially asked the board, What do you want me to do here? The board said with a single voice, Fill the church. So that's what the young minister set out to do. Within a month, he'd changed the worship format from country style to Christian rock. He hid the hymn books, and he set up an overhead projector so everyone could see the words to the new drum-fueled music. The preacher spent the bulk of his time in the city, convincing his friends and family to drive out and support his new ministry. He enlisted tambourine and guitar players, drummers, and worship dancers, the likes of which these country folks had never seen, except maybe on television. In 6 months' time, the church had gone from 1 to 3 services and was packed for each service. Most of the new folks were mesmerized by the young preacher's charisma. Money was flowing into the coffers of his hand-picked treasurer. Sadly, the longtime members were feeling more and more alienated, mainly because the new church folks were strangers from town, outsiders. At the next board meeting, the church council complained against the preacher in no uncertain terms. We don't know these people. There are plenty of folks right around here you can go get into church. But the preacher had a temper of his own. When I asked you what you wanted me to do, you told me to fill the church, and that's exactly what I did. One of the ladies on the council cried out, But Pastor, we meant for you to bring in our kin and make this church just like it was in 1958. From here on in, the young preacher and the church council went to war. There were plenty of friendly folks in the church now, so he didn't need those old troublemakers anymore. So the preacher began a new campaign to get rid of the council. He sowed seeds of discord, told lies, and spied on them. When he heard a tidbit of gossip, he named names from the pulpit. Still, nobody left the church. After his 8th month, he made a bid for the church building. If it was his, he could put anyone out he wished, you see. But once he learned it was owned by the denomination, he moved all the new people out, took the treasury, and had him a brand new church built right down the road within a couple of weeks. The district superintendent warned the council that this might happen, but they wouldn't hear him. So he let them have their way in the matter. The church elders called the superintendent a legalistic Pharisee. But after it all hit the fan, this same legalistic Pharisee appointed me to pick up the pieces of the original church, a job I was glad to do. This is a true story. We had no sooner started than we began hearing about the previous pastor's public exposés. I asked one lady why she didn't leave the church. She said, Brother Jack, nobody left the church. In fact, we could hardly wait to hear the latest dirt he'd dish up. Although this young preacher was obviously a wolf in sheep's clothing, the congregation who hired him, who would fill the church at all costs, who got obsessed with hearing the latest gossip from the pulpit, was just as deeply bemired in sin as their former pastor. They should have listened to the legalistic Pharisee. Now we've learned that our own district superintendent was in attendance at the MacDavid Church, which is right down the road here, a couple Sundays ago. Reverend Chun and his wife Carol go to different churches every Sunday. They want to experience their churches in action. After all, that's their job. I'm sure Reverend Chun notes the feel of the congregation, the style, dress, and message of the minister. However, though he has oversight, I believe their particular priority as a ministry couple is worshiping. But I'm sure that if Reverend Chun visits a church and hears preaching contrary to solid doctrine, he'll make it known to that preacher. After all, this is one of Reverend Chun's main ministries. He's set apart to make distinctions. In our gospel lesson, we're again introduced to the title Pharisee. A Pharisee, by definition, is one set apart to make distinctions. The Pharisees' mission was to check up on preachers and judge as to whether they conformed to the law and traditions of the Jewish religion. Pharisees felt that Yahweh had raised up their movement to protect the poor from being intellectually or financially swindled by some pretender, like the young preacher in my story. Just as there are good superintendents and poor ones, good pastors and inept ones, there are good Pharisees and evil Pharisees in the stories of Scripture. With the Pharisees, those set apart to make distinctions, we always find scribes, trained in record-keeping and law. Many Pharisees, though in positions as overseers, they couldn't read. Scribes were like secretaries, lawyers, interpreters, and reporters, all rolled up into one. Pharisees usually get a scolding in the Gospels. Jesus argues with them a lot, and we learn from those arguments that his and their teachings were quite similar. Jesus undoubtedly knew some would be converted, like Nicodemus, Gamaliel, and Paul. When Jesus was lifted up on the stake, many Pharisees came to believe. However, there were Pharisees whose intentions were never godly because they were natural offspring of the devil planted among the religious to cause havoc. So here are the Pharisees and scribes way north here in Galilee from denominational headquarters in Jerusalem to report on the acts and teachings of Jesus, the rabbi. What gave Pharisees authority over Jesus? Did Jesus have a district superintendent? Wasn't he a loner, a maverick, bringing the word of the kingdom? Well, I wonder. Jesus was known by all as Rabboni and Master. Even those who didn't know him personally hailed him as a teacher. There must have been some way others could recognize his vocation. When I go on hospital visitation, I often wear a clerical collar to the hospital. When people see that collar, there's no confusing my vocation. It opens up opportunities to minister like nothing else. So how else might Jesus be identified as a rabbi by sight unless he wore the prayer robe that identified him as such? The Bible implies that Jesus wore a seamless white robe of linen. Only those of the rabbinic, priestly, or kingly vocation would wear the white linen. Jesus' robe had a hem with tzitzit dangling, that is, 613 tassels representing the law of Yahweh, and the sacred name of his Father may have been embroidered upon the shoulder. So if Jesus was an officially recognized teacher of the Jews, and I can offer many other indications that he was, then maybe the Pharisees did indeed have some authority to oversee him, and their many challenges certainly gave Jesus valuable opportunities to debate them openly while remaining out of their clutches in Galilee. After 7 chapters of reasoning with Pharisees, Jesus is more than ready to show his lack of respect for this particular crew who've been hounding him. They watch some of Jesus' converts eating and then ask a question. Why do your disciples cross our denominational traditions by eating with unclean hands? We moderns don't think washing hands before eating is such a bad idea. We see signs on public restroom walls demanding that employees wash before returning to the job. Everyone knows that dangerous diseases are spread by uncleanliness. But the washing required by the Pharisees' tradition wasn't accomplished for the sake of cleanliness, but outward ceremony only. They didn't even use soap. The ritual of cleansing hands, food, and table were very complicated and described in detail in the Mishnah, a book of sayings attributed to rabbis. Almost 200 pages in the Mishnah are devoted to ceremonial washings. These ceremonies hadn't come from the Bible, but from the words of rabbis long dead. Among the sayings of the Mishnah is this one: if the scribes say your right hand is your left, you are to believe them. Now that saying alone is enough to disqualify the rest, but here's another that bears upon our text today. He sins as much eating with unwashed hands as lying with a harlot. Certainly, these Pharisees are going to report that these righteous men with Jesus were breaking the 7th commandment just because they didn't wash in a certain way. By the way, what's the 7th commandment? Do you remember? This is why Jesus recited to them the words of Yahweh from Isaiah. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching their own doctrines, holding back the commandments of Yahweh, and holding fast the tradition of men. Remember, we're talking about law enforcement here. Not washing just right would incur the same penalty as breaking the 7th commandment, the death penalty. And just because of the nonsensical blubbering of a dead rabbi years before, as recorded in the Mishnah. Now to change the subject a little. The last time we had a guest speaker, he asked me a question. Do you have the 10 Commandments posted anywhere in this church? Why do you ask? I wondered. He said, I'm taking a survey of all the churches I go to. Now how about it? I said, I wonder why any church would display the 10 Commandments if they neither knew them nor followed them. In fact, many consider them nailed to the cross. He said to me, just who doesn't follow the 10 Commandments? I said, why, sir, you don't follow them. Unless, of course, you keep the 7th-day Sabbath holy, doing no work then, you or your household. Why, there was no comment from him, so, of course, I apologized. I noticed the next week, though, that someone had hung the commandments in the back of the church. Oh, right over there they are. Now I understand why the guest speaker was so interested in taking his survey. The 10 Commandments have received a lot of publicity of late owing to Judge Roy Moore's 5,300-pound replica of the 10 Commandments erected on the rotunda of the Alabama Capitol. You may have seen it on the news last Saturday, August 23rd, 2003. I'm really dating this tape now. And that is Judge Moore, called a political rally to explain why he was disobeying federal and state courts by not removing the monument. I cannot violate my conscience, he said. My question is, could he not violate his conscience, yet violate the 10 Commandments themselves by calling a public political meeting on the Sabbath? At this particular time in preparing this message, I receive an email that says, I'm interested in your take on the controversy about the 10 Commandments monument flap. Yeah, just now. I had to start thinking about it. Somebody really cared about what I thought, and the email came in just as I was thinking about it. 2 years ago, I preached on this same subject, agreeing with Judge Moore's stand. A tape of that message is available. And in his speech of last week, August 23rd that is, I was impressed by his rhetoric and the fact that the monument was to be hidden while the bust of a Greek god was to be displayed instead. On the other hand, I believe Judge Moore broke the law in placing the gigantic monument. I'm fearful of any judge who's above the law or figures himself to be the law. I think he's done as a judge. He'll run for another public office soon, maybe governor of California or something. What would help me is to know if Judge Moore can actually recite the 10 Commandments. What would help me more is to learn that he actually abides by the 10 Commandments. If that was to be the case, we wouldn't be ashamed to stand with him, as the disciples stood with Peter when he said to the authorities, we ought to obey God rather than men. Acts 5:29. But everybody's interested in the monument. A young lady asked me, what do you think about the case in Montgomery? I answered her with a question. What do you think's the real issue? The 10 Commandments or the stone monument? She said, I guess I really don't know. I said, I don't know either. Then I asked her, do you know the 10 Commandments? She replied, yeah, sure. I said, good. I'm taking a survey. See, I got that idea from our last speaker. Which day do you keep holy? Of course, this is a trick question because there's only one Sabbath, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. Her answer was, whenever I choose. I said, you see, that's what I mean about the real issue, the commandments or the monument. In the 10 Commandments, God's very specific as to which day to keep, whereas the monument is a man's representation of the fourth as well as all the commandments. So here's an example of choosing to follow a plain commandment or the tradition that pops out of it. To support a monument while not supporting what's on the monument is something of a paradox. We see how the Pharisees put their notions above the law of Yahweh, and we condemn it. Yet we do the very same thing all the time, howbeit with good intentions. Good intentions, I'm told, is the paving stone to the road that leads somewhere. I can't remember where exactly. Now, moving from the theoretical to the concrete, so to speak, one's knowledge of the fourth commandment is a good indication as to whether the commandments as a whole are known. Everybody knows not to murder, and relatively few people would even consider murdering. Same with some of the other commandments. Many Christians today would parrot church doctrine and say, those commandments are nailed to the cross along with the rest of the law. But in the time remaining, let's consider Jesus' opinion about this notion. He says in Matthew 5:18 and 19, this is the simple English version, while heaven and earth are standing, not even the smallest letter or part of a letter can be changed in the law until everything is completed. Anyone who disobeys even one of the smallest commands and teaches this way to others will not be important in the kingdom of heaven, but anyone who obeys and teaches will be important in the kingdom of heaven. I tell you, if your righteousness is no better than that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you'll not even enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, with that quote from Jesus, permit me to guide you through a couple of very quick exercises. If the commandments are really important to us, where can we read them in the Bible for ourselves? Do you know where to find them? That's a test for you. 2 places, Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5. A second exercise. The second commandment says this, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. Do you have a picture of Jesus in your house, or in your church, someplace? Granted, we don't worship the picture itself, but isn't this a graven image of who we bow down to and serve? Let's be honest. How about a third exercise? The third commandment says, Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. In all but a very few English Bible translations, we don't read any name in that verse at all. But as most of you know, in this verse, and in 7,000 other Bible locations, man's tradition has overwritten the sacred name of our God with the Lord. The L-O-R-D in capital letters. Now I'm wondering if it's not taking Yahweh's name in vain if we worship a nameless deity, the Lord, or worse, one we've named God, an Iranian loanword meaning to invoke, as to invoke a spirit. This message may be shocking to those who don't know, but I didn't get it from an obscure book on theology, but from the Reader's Digest in the dentist's office. I sometimes feel like Paul in Athens, speaking to the great people of faith there. Athenians, I've seen for myself how scrupulous you are in all religious matters, because as I strolled around, I noticed an altar inscribed to an unknown God. In fact, the unknown God you revere is the one I proclaim. Now, this is me talking and not Paul. I came here proclaiming the unknown God. Yahweh is his name, and I'm not ashamed of it, for he tells us through his prophet Zechariah, when Yahweh becomes king of the world, he will be the one and the only king, and his name the one and only name. I'm working with a team to translate the World English Bible. My job is translating Leviticus. As such, I have a great concern for translators, especially modern translators, who conform to the traditions of religious men by omitting the name of our God from their translations, replacing it with the Lord. For Yahweh will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain, and thus leadeth millions astray from true worship. Woe to them! Check your own translation notes to see if this isn't so. It's the largest and worst religious falsehood ever perpetrated on humankind. Let's go on then to the fourth exercise. Will you please allow me to belabor a point? But have we ever actually read the fourth commandment? It's about the longest and certainly most detailed. Here's the correct translation. Exodus 28. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, But the seventh day is a Sabbath for Yahweh your God. You shall do no work that day, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your servants, men or women, nor your animals, nor the alien living with you. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens, earth, and sea, and all these contain. But on the seventh day he rested. And that's why Yahweh has blessed the Sabbath day and made it sacred. Now, if you're a commandment keeper, you have no choice as to what day to keep holy unto him. Which day is the seventh? It couldn't be clearer on the calendar. Sabbath means seventh. Neither could it be clearer what is required on that day. It's perfectly clear. Now you know. And now you know. Now the 10 Commandments are just a small part of Yahweh's law. There's much, much more. Jesus said that the law of liberty would never, ever pass away. No, not ever. The reason Jesus' brother James calls it the law of liberty is because enforced law protects innocent people from lawless people, from criminals. If everyone followed the law and it was enforced equitably with mercy, as Jesus would enforce it, as Yahweh would when he becomes king of the world, there'll be an end to violence in our world completely, and the whole creation will be set at liberty, liberty under law. As Christians, we claim to be signers of the new covenant, in which the law is written on our hearts instead of on stone. We find this declaration in Jeremiah 31, 33, and 34. This is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel when those days have come, Yahweh declares. Within them I shall plant my law, writing it on their hearts. Then I shall be their God, and they will be my people. There will be no further need for everyone to teach neighbor or brother, saying, learn to know Yahweh. No, they will all know me from the least to the greatest, Yahweh declares, since I shall forgive their guilt and never more call their sin to mind. Now, what law do you suppose is to be written on hearts? There's only one law, the law of Yahweh, consisting in the first 5 books of the Bible. The law of the children of Israel. That same law, Yahweh's law, is our law today, and will be our law in the days when Jesus is ruler over the earth. We ought to know that law. We may be judges in that blessed time of millennium. You may judge Roy Moore, for all you know. His intention will be perfectly clear then, and I truly hope they are pure. Now finally, one other thing in regards to the monument in Montgomery, and then I'll let you go. Most Christians have been taught that the handwriting of ordinances nailed to the cross, that Paul talks about in Colossians 2:14, is the law of the Old Testament, destroyed by grace. We grant that some of the law has been repealed. The Bible is very clear on which parts. No more animal sacrifice, for instance. Yahweh's son Yahshua was the last blood to be spilt. Food laws have also been repealed to some extent, according to Mark 7:15. Though sticking with the old food laws will keep you much healthier. Since the majority of Christians believe the law is nailed to the cross, I know they do because I've heard them say it over and over, then there really is no accounting for the support that Judge Moore is getting from Christians on keeping this monument. It should be Jews that are lining up behind him. If the judge's action does nothing more than to get Christians to rethink this deplorable nailing to the cross doctrine, then actually read and study the 10 Commandments, maybe these lawless Christians might actually start hallowing the name of Yahweh, observing the Sabbath, and enforcing the law of liberty to everybody's benefit. Honest to goodness, they need to know the law. Whether Moore is just politicking or not, there's a slight possibility that this whole thing could turn out to be a wonderful revival of truth, revelation of the sacred name, and a return to the Hebrew roots of our faith. A return to where we belong, in Yahweh. Oh, that would be glory for me. Let's pray that this be the case.
You have been listening to Jackson Snyder Presents on Hebrew Nation Radio. This message was recorded August 31st, 2003.